What is it about a small town that draws them in and keeps them there? The mom and pop eateries? The city parks? The ability to ride your golf cart around town? The non-existent traffic? The picturesque, rural countryside? Or is it the waves crashing into the shore on Kentucky Lake and the Tennessee River?
I just love the people of the town.
The people of this community love this community.
It's our people.
People.
We believe it's the people. Join us as we embark on the past, present, and future of Calvert City, celebrating 150 years of greatness. Calvert City, great life, great community. This documentary was made possible by CADA, the City of Calvert, Studio 270, and countless residents sharing their history in Calvert City, especially Bobby Faust.
My ancestry goes deep in Calvert City.
The banks of the Tennessee River, where Calvert City resides today, was once owned by the Chickasaw Nation.
My ancestors came to this region while it was still Chickasaw territory. They came with an entourage led by Dr. John Howard and his brother Stephen Howard.
In 1818, under Andrew Jackson's Treaty of Longtown, the U.S. government agreed to pay the Chickasaws $20,000 per year for 15 years in return for the Chickasaws' claim to land. Where Calvert City sits today was nothing more than a quaint farming community. Settlers came by the Tennessee River with land grants in 1822.
A lot of people in Calvert City don't really realize that Calvert sits on the river. You know, it doesn't flow right through town, so it does sit right on the town. There was a ferry here in Calvert for many years.
Haddock's Ferry opened in 1836 and shaved hours off of travel time for many folks.
It was a shorter route than crossing the river via Patterson Ferry. And so for the settlers who were coming into this wilderness area, getting back across the river to Smithland was important because that's where they obtained their supplies.
They would take wagons down to Haddock's Ferry and load up barrels of water to bring back to the farm. They also fished, they also musselled, they also baptized at Haddock's Ferry.
Patilla W. Calvert, a direct descendant of Baltimore's Lord Calvert, received more than 2,000 acres in the land grant along the Tennessee River and the Big Cypress Creek. He married his first wife, Helen Wilson, in the summer of 1853 and began the construction of their home, Oak Hill, that was completed in the fall of 1860. Helen never saw the completion of the home project as she died in 1858. Calvert was already a well-established landowner and businessman. Surveyors for the Paducah and Elizabethtown Railroad accepted Patilla Calvert's offer to donate right-of-way if the railroad would build a shipping station near his home. This was accomplished, and the depot was named Calvert City. Patilla's home still stands today. What was once the center of Calvert City, Oak Hill is a beautiful two-story home that has had many residents since the 1800s.
I grew up in the Calvert house, the house that Mr. Calvert built when he came to town in 1860, they say.
Quality materials were used from the exterior siding to the nails and even the coloring pigments used in the paint.
There's a neat little book called Oak Hill.
My dad wrote a book about the house we grew up in, Oak Hill, kind of like historical fiction, I guess. He wrote about the way life was back in the late 1800s.
After the death of his wife, Patilla remarried, and a new mistress moved into Oak Hill. Margaret Jane Carr was 18 years younger than Patilla, and they met on a cattle buying trip in Henry County, Tennessee. The following year, in 1871, Calvert City was incorporated as a city. John Taylor, a blacksmith, became the first mayor, and Pete Summers, the town marshal. Those early pioneers started businesses and helped develop the city that grew up around the depot. During that same year of 1871, the first supposed Major League Baseball game was played and the United States Commission on Fish and Fisheries was founded. Calvert City began as a farming community. The railroad brought life to the land and the growth came with it. Calvert City quickly became a bustling city.
The railroad was a major employer in the town, and Calvert City had passenger service until 1956. And going back to Calvert City High School, the fact that the town was on a rail line, students came as far away from Catawba and Lyon County into Calvert City to attend the Calvert City High School, Little Cypress, and over toward Breland. So the rail line was a major source of commerce and activity in the community.
In 1872, the city was platted into 19 blocks and 133 lots, with 6 streets running east and 6 streets running west. The earliest business development took place along what is now roughly 3 blocks of Railroad Avenue between Main and Aspen Streets and 3 blocks north of the railroad.
There were several homes built on the north side of the railroad. That was the heart of the city.
In the 1870s, Patilla Calvert and his brother built a 2-story hotel fronting Railroad Street. John Lander and his wife Mary bought and operated the hotel and also bought Haddock's Ferry in 1885 from Willie P. Finley and her husband L.E. Finley. The Lander Hotel no longer exists after a fire on one very cold night in 1974. It was located in the north parking lot of the First Baptist Church. The depot in Calvert City brought life to a quiet river town. Passenger trains came through daily, and life in Calvert City started to bloom. Stores were popping up from different families such as the Stringers, the Cox family, the Draffins, and the Salings. There were not many good years in the 1930s. Times were hard across the United States, and Calvert City was no different. William Roy Draffin remembered his family spending the night in his father's store while his father slept with a gun by his side. People were desperate. People were starving. But Oak Hill seemed to always be the place that people could go for a hot dinner. The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of this country. And then in 1937, the skies opened and it rained for 19 days.
And the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back was the Great Flood of 1937.
I know we have pictures of the 1937 flood, and where our house is, it was actually up to the windows. And Daddy at that time was in school at Murray, and I remember he was telling stories of hitchhiking home because the flooding was so bad. I didn't realize it was so cold, but you could actually see chunks of ice.
We lived at Heath, our family did, and refugees come out of Paducah, just gobs of them come out of Paducah and come in there in Heath High School and slept in the floor of the gymnasium there at Heath School. And my daddy fired the coal furnace to keep them warm.
The rivers began to flood. Homes and businesses north of the railroad were underwater, and it was apparent that something needed to change.
A name in Calvert City that is pretty famous is the Draffin name.
George Luther Draffin was born on July 13, 1890, to John Henry Draffin and his wife Susie Tibbs Draffin. When Luther was barely a teenager, he traveled to Paducah and got a job with Rechoff Saddlery, earning $3 a week. He paid $2.50 for room and board, and after learning the trade, he moved back to Calvert City and opened his own harness repair shop in 1906. The next year, Luther's older brother Mert moved home from St. Louis, and the two borrowed $300 from their father and opened Draffin Brothers Farm Supply Company. The Farm Supply Company later became Draffin Brothers Department Store in 1916. It was a store that had everything from groceries to clothing, farm supplies, and hardware.
That was the big box store of its time because they had everything.
Draffin's department store, they had about anything you would want.
It had everything, groceries in the back, and if you went in the back door. And then up front, they had everything in the world that you could imagine.
And they had everything in there that, that you kind of really needed at the time.
I never had a pair of shoes that didn't come from Draffin's department store.
Luther served as president of the Lower Tennessee Valley Association and lobbied hard to get a hydroelectric dam built on the Lower Tennessee River.
We all knew that Luther Draffin, one of the owners of the department store, was very involved in working the political scene to get Kentucky Dam built.
After turning his garage into a boatyard where volunteers built a fleet of boats to rescue more than 2,000 stranded flood victims in 1937, that dream finally came to fruition on July 1st, 1938, when Congress appropriated $2.6 million for construction.
I lived in Grand Rivers until I was 4. And Mom and Dad used to talk about the dam because that's why we were there. He was hired to work on the construction of the dam.
I came to Calvert City because Kentucky Dam flooded our farmland way down in Tennessee, and I couldn't get away from Tennessee River, so I came to Calvert City.
I remember that one of the first trips we made in our car was driving through Gilbertsville, where the dam was underway, was being built. It had been underway, the construction there, for 2 years. And I remember seeing the homes there, up on huge wooden rollers. People who wanted to move their homes were able to do that.
What was it like working on the dam?
It was hard work. Hard work.
Lots of concrete.
Pick and shovel. I bought my first automobile working up there on the dam, paid for it, 37.5 cents an hour.
Kentucky Dam is 22 miles upstream from the confluence of the Tennessee River with the Ohio River. The dam is the longest in the TVA system, and the reservoir, which stretches for 184 miles across Kentucky and Tennessee, is the largest in the eastern United States. On the tail end of the Great Depression, the construction of the dam not only helped with the decades of flooding issues on farmers' land, but also provided a boost to the local economy by providing roughly 5,000 jobs.
So when I think about Calvert City as a true Americana success story, I kind of think about how the development that happened after Kentucky Dam was constructed probably came at a really good time for the entire region. Unemployment was very high. There was a lot of poverty in this area. And so when that kick-started the industrial growth that we've seen in Calvert City, but also throughout the entire region, I think that gave people opportunity and hope to stay here, to work here, to have their families live here.
Because of Luther's persistence, the location of Kentucky Dam was placed just up the road from Calvert City. Before the dam, thousands were leaving to find work in automobile factories in Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and Kentucky Dam brought in skilled laborers from all over the country. Many families relocated to Calvert City because of the opportunity to work at Kentucky Dam. Many believe that's what's made Calvert City so special. Different people and cultures from all over the United States moving to live and work in Calvert City.
The people that came here as a result of the dam, they helped us grow. They helped it become a more universal community, because they're not just the people that grew up here now. It's the people that have come here from all over the United States, and even sometimes from foreign countries, that have come here and settled and have grown this community.
LTVA, led by Luther Draffin, was made up of roughly 40 business leaders from western Kentucky, northwest Tennessee, southeast Missouri, and southern Illinois.
Now, the Lower Tennessee Valley Association was not just Kentucky people. It was made up of about 40 business people, so the whole region was interested in getting Kentucky Dam built.
On October 10, 1945, Kentucky Dam was dedicated on a platform just below the powerful engineering success.
Everybody was dressed up. Women wore their high heels and their church-going clothes. Men wore suits and ties. We knew that something big had been accomplished. Even at 11 years old, I knew that something really important was happening that day.
President Harry S. Truman spoke at the dedication and summed up the success of TVA as, quote, a formula comprised of modern science, good management, and common sense, end quote. A crowd of 15,000 people gathered at the dam to hear the president speak.
President and Bess Truman were friends of Dora and Luther Draffin. And he came, and people have said that Luther Draffin was responsible for getting President Truman to come and dedicate the dam. It was a bright, sunshiny day, and optimism was in the air.
He continued on to say, quote, the south and middle west of this nation are now connected by water transportation. The benefits of this dam go not only to the Tennessee Valley, they go to St. Paul and Minneapolis, to New Orleans and Memphis, to St. Louis and Kansas City, to Omaha and Sioux City, to all of the communities of the great Mississippi Valley that is served by our inland waterways, end quote.
Rumor has it that Luther Draffin had a president stay at his house.
That was when President Truman came. We went down, and he went over there, and Miss Dora gave him hot dogs. That was quite a day that day.
Of course, Luther Draffin didn't cease in his forward way of thinking. He knew that the power from the new dam could generate far more electricity.
The community did change as a result of that, and that gave impetus to the flood control, the water management issues, and then, of course, the generation of electricity, which led to the developments of the plant complex. And that forever changed the face and economics of Calvert City once that happened.
He, along with Charles Hall, wrote roughly 1,000 letters to industries across the United States, and in 1949, their diligence paid off.
We have the industrial complex at Calvert City. It was a result of actual work that Luther Draffin did. He recruited a young man named Charles Hall. But Charles wrote 1,000 letters to industrial plants, asking them to locate a plant here in Calvert City and telling them the amenities that were offered. Mr. Draffin and Charles Hall were successful in 1948 when the Pennsylvania Salt Manufacturing Company announced it would build a plant.
Pennsylvania Salt Company opened, and shortly thereafter, other industries followed suit, turning Calvert City into one of the largest industrial centers in the Southeast.
As I'm growing up, the industry is coming, and the quality of life in Calvert City is far improving. But we had the great benefit of having at our disposal some wonderful people who came with those industries, who came from cultures far different than ours.
And I always say that we were diverse before diversity was popular. In my age group in the 50s, we had a lot of people moving in when the plants came into being and moving in here. So I went to school not with just people from Marshall County, but I went to school with people from Louisville, from Indiana, from Pennsylvania, from a lot of different places. And at the time, maybe we thought that some of their ways were a little weird, and I'm sure they thought ours were. But looking back, it really gave us a head start, I think.
I look back at it, Calvert City was probably the most cosmopolitan city in the area.
Because of those plants, people came in here from everywhere. I didn't really understand at the time that probably was a little abnormal for such a small little town in far western Kentucky.
You had a lot of people that would come into the community with the plants, and they would be here for a period of 3 to 4 years, and then they would move elsewhere. So I can think back, and a lot of kids that I went to school with, we only knew them for a short period of time, and they were gone for the community. And to this day, you can't wonder what happened with some of them.
Pennsylvania Salt Company, now Arkema, celebrated its 70th anniversary in Calvert City in 2019. Arkema, along with Ashland, Evonik Corporation, Carbide Industries, Cimatec Corporation, Estron Chemical, Lubrizol Advanced Materials, Sekisui Specialty, Vocker, Westlake, and Clean Earth provide high-wage, high-demand jobs for our community and our region.
Yeah, I remember when the plants all started coming in. My daddy was one of the first employees at Penn Salt.
I wasn't born here. I was born in Pennsylvania. My father got transferred with the Penn Salt plant down here. My mother would drive down there with his supper And we would drive right up to his control room and get out and go into his control room and eat supper with him. And you wouldn't even dare do that now with all the everything going on. I mean, and I tell people that, and they say, "You doing it?" I said, "Yeah."
And almost everybody in my family had, a job that was either at one of the plants or some business in Calvert or in the area that supported them in some way.
And then at that time, the group, the men of several different plants, we had softball teams where the people from the plant played softball in different locations. Mainly at the old park is where we did most of our softball playing.
Because of the efforts of our early citizens, Calvert City continues to dream and keep Calvert City forever moving forward.
When I knew Mr. Draffin, he was already getting up in years. And he lost much of the vigor that he had those early years, but he hadn't lost any of his compassion, I don't think. Had a great vision for Calvert City, could see improving the quality of life for lots of people, and worked tirelessly for that effort.
The 1800s was a time in history when many Americans were struggling just to provide the basic needs for their family. Tax money didn't fund schools, so parents were faced with the reality that if they wanted their children to learn how to read, they needed to pay for it. There were no schools in the community before 1868. That year, Jimmy Draffin, John String, and Alicia Cox started a public subscription education system. A log schoolhouse was built on what is now the corner of First Avenue and Main Street. Goober Smith was the first teacher. In 1918, Lucy Faust started a drive to establish a high school. 50% of the cost would be paid for by the town residents and 50% by the Marshall County Board of Education. In the fall of 1919, Calvert City High School opened with a 2-year program.
People do not realize the effect that it had on this community. A high school diploma at that time was comparable to what a college degree would be now, because you had a lower percentage of the population that were high school grads, but it did open the doors to allow a lot of people to complete a high school education and thus obtain better jobs.
Homer and Larry Ford, parents of Dr. H.W. Ford, were the first teachers. Enrollment grew, and by 1922, the first high school class graduated from a 4-year program.
We had numerous doctors, bankers, lawyers, educators that came out of that school, so its impact was tremendous.
Because of the continued growth, the building was replaced by a new brick building. It cost $25,000 to build the new school and housed 1st through 12th grades until 1954, when Calvert City and Sharp High Schools were consolidated to form North Marshall High School in Palma.
Then I went to Calvert, to high school. 4 years. Last class to graduate from Calvert City High School, 1955.
It was high school when I started school there. First grade, it was Calvert City High School. And I think the high school moved in 1955 and went to North Marshall. And I remember the big consolidation was a big hoopla when the schools all went together.
In 1960, the elementary school that we all know now on Fifth Avenue opened.
I think everybody that went to that school loved that school and the building, and there were trophies from the time it was a high school, and a huge gym, a stage, it was just almost magical, except you had to do homework, and that sort of ruined it.
Calvert Elementary was just a special spot. All the teachers knew each other and loved each other and supported each other.
Throughout my teaching career, any time that our school has had a need, the community has come together and they've helped us. We're able to study about community services and then walk down the sidewalk and go to City Hall and go to the fire department and go to the police department, go to the library and actually see those community services live. It's not just something that we talk about.
Usually we have couches and dining room tables and coffee tables where the kids are able to spread out and kind of get comfortable with themselves and then get in their element of how they're going to study and do the different project-based learning that we do.
Something that makes Calvert stand out of any of our Western Kentucky schools is that our children ride their bikes to school or they walk to school. That's a normal thing. And we have little bike racks for them to put them in and chain them up if they really need to. although chaining your bike in Calvert is not really something anyone ever does.
Grades 5th through 8th remained in the old high school until the night of November 21st, 1968, when the building burned.
But I remember when we rolled into it, it was totally engulfed. I mean, it went up so fast, and there was not really much we could save and do.
In 1982, Howard Beth of Calvert City coached his Marshall County High School Lady Marshals basketball team to the Kentucky State Girls Basketball Championship played at Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond. And in 1984, the Lady Marshals did it again, becoming state champions of Kentucky High School Girls Basketball. The 1984 Lady Marshals were the last Marshall County High School basketball team to win a state championship. Howard and Ann's son Aaron led the 2021 Lady Marshals to the finals of the state championship in Rupp Arena. They lost 49-47 to Sacred Heart Academy in the nail-biting final seconds. Lee Cox was a businessman in Calvert City for many years. When his will was probated on December 21, 1950, he left $100,000 to the American Bible Society. The remainder of his considerable real estate holdings and cash were donated to the city to build the Lee Cox Memorial Hospital. The hospital was to, quote, be built on the property known as the Old Finley Place, just east of Calvert City, end quote. Cox authorized real estate agent H. Vernon Duckett, with Mert Draffin's supervision, to handle the sale of his real and personal property. On January 12, 1958, Dr. Traylor announced pending construction. Traylor had located here in 1956, and the clinic opened September 1, 1962, housing the offices of Drs. William J. Colburn, Traylor, and Richard I. Cox.
Dr. Traylor came in, and then me and Dr. Traylor and Dr. Cox, the dentist, we decided to build that clinic over there. Cox died a little bit before I got here, and John Lovett was in charge of his affairs, and he left everything to Calvert City to build a hospital. I said, Calvert City is not big enough for a hospital, and could we use some of that money to build the clinic, and then we'll rent it from you on that? So he said, yeah, that'd be fine, he thought.
Though a hospital was never built, the Calvert City Convalescent Center opened on Cox's land in 1973, and Cox Manor Apartments, built later, also stand on the property he left to the city. Besides the clinic building, Convalescent Center, Cox Manor Apartments, City Hall, the Calvert branch of the Marshall County Public Library, and the Civic Center, the skate park, basketball court, and the ball fields between the railroad and those buildings all stand on property Lee Cox left to the city.
I love the parks. I brag about Calvert City all the time on our parks.
The first skate park in Western Kentucky was here.
In the early 2000s, Jordan Coburn and Wes Canup, two young men in Calvert, decided they wanted a skate park in the city. And at the time, my oldest son, Chris Bynum, was on the city council. There was some resistance to having a skate park just because it wasn't totally understood what a skate park was and what it could be for the community. And there was opposition from some of the members on the council, and this was in 2002, 2003. Chris was a big old boy, and he knew that team sports weren't for everyone. Now, he did play team sports, but after a while, his weight and other things just got in the way. But he knew that some kids needed an individual sport. And so he supported the skate park. And it was tough going. And I have to say that Wes and Jordan never gave up on their vision. Well, in 2003, Chris was killed in a four-wheeler accident. And one of the good things that came from that tragic event was that the skate park did pass through the council, that it was decided that they would build a skate park and that they would name it after Chris. And it was first located right behind the Civic Center, and it was a good outlet for a lot of kids. And then I'm trying to think, several years after that, almost 10 years after that, there were some criticisms had surfaced again about the skate park, and at the time the council had decided maybe not to, that they would not fund the skate park. So Mama came to the rescue and we started I would call it a grassroots effort to save the skate park. And I think it's one of those things where God intended for there to be a skate park here. And a lot of the kids got together. They went to the council meetings, meeting after meeting, telling them the good things that the skate park could be and how much it meant to them. And I went to Lynn, and I sat down, Lynn Jones, and I sat down with him, and I just told him, I said, you know, there's been times when you and I have not agreed on things, and I said, but I've never doubted your love for Calvert City. I still don't doubt his love for Calvert City. And I said, please help me save this skate park. And he said, Nita, the skate park's okay. We're going to have a skate park. And he was true to his word. And God blessed our efforts. I mean, he truly did. And Alex Evans is one of the boys. There's several others that were involved in this. And not only did we save the skate park, but the skate park was moved and it was doubled in size. And we had a rededication of the skate park, again, thanks to Lynn, and it's still named after Chris. And I just love it that it's there.
Because of the industrial complex in Calvert City, neighbors were not typically born and raised in Calvert City. In the 1950s and 60s, Calvert City residents were from all over the United States. Because of this, it made Calvert City unique in culture and spirit. Like many small towns, riding bikes to the Five and Dime or catching a movie at the local theater were all part of growing up in Calvert City.
Man, what an awesome place to grow up.
We would go off into the woods in the morning and be home for dinner. So it was a safe place. We could do things like that, and our parents didn't really worry about us. Of course, our parents were everybody in the neighborhood. You couldn't get away with anything because you were being raised by community.
And just riding our bikes through the streets of Calvert and playing outside until it was dark, and you knew when those street lights came on, that was time to go home.
We could ride our bikes, and our parents didn't expect to see us back until it was dinner time.
Back then, you could ride your bike, not have to worry about anything. I mean, nothing.
I did a lot of bicycle, just running around the neighborhood kids just playing all the time.
We were bicycle warriors. We'd ride to somebody's house and they'd feed us, and we'd ride to somebody else's house and they'd feed us, and then we'd ride to the lake.
But we rode bicycles everywhere, and I lived up Evergreen Street, and if you come up Evergreen Street and across the yard of the Presbyterian Church into the parking lot of the little, there's some apartments up there, they had a gravel parking lot, then the bicycles had worn a path. After you left the parking lot, you could go down into the backyard of the shopping center, and in just a second you could be at Miss Ross's and get sweet tarts.
The kids in Calvert City were always a pretty good group of kids, and they were always pretty close. It didn't matter if you were from Hawthorne Street, or you were from Holly Street, or you lived over on Evergreen.
We had free reign of the town. You could run around on your bicycles and go meet people for massive wiffle ball games in the church lot of the Presbyterian Church.
The only sport that I really remember was baseball. And we only had just the one baseball diamond, and that was at what's now known as Old Park. And it was the park at that time.
We played all of our games at Old Park, what you call Old Park now, which was the only park at that time.
Old Park was here, and we would play baseball out there, softball. But really and truly, that was about the only ball field or anything we had. When you look around now, it's amazing at how many facilities we do have here in town.
That was the primary park, was Old Park. There were a couple of different ball fields there.
And I'm sure other people have told you that area was known for having huge mosquitoes.
So there were huge mosquitoes out there.
Couldn't hardly stay down there, the mosquitoes back you off.
If you just stand still a minute, the mosquitoes would pick you up and carry you over to right field. and you wouldn't have to take us down.
You wouldn't want little kids playing in the outfield because the mosquitoes might take them off.
Have you ever seen a mosquito that big in all your life?
Well, that was back really before the time of good mosquito spray.
And so you played a ball game and you covered yourself with 612 insect repellent. So you stunk to high heaven, but it didn't matter, but you had to keep those bugs off of it.
Evelyn Harrington, now 110 years of age, and her late husband Paul built the Calvert City Drive-In. Prior to building their own theater, Paul worked for Ruffin Amusement Company and traveled all over the region building movie theaters and performing maintenance. In 1950, Paul and Evelyn purchased the Calvert Theater that was located on the west side of Main Street, where Industrial Process Equipment Group is now located.
But my sister and I used to walk to Calvert on Saturday afternoons to see the movie. There was an indoor theater over by Drafton's department store. And so we would go, and for a quarter, we could see a double header, I'm sure it was a Western, and get popcorn and have a penny back.
Calvert City has had 6 mayors since 1871. John Taylor, a blacksmith, was elected as the first mayor of Calvert City. In 1961, Mayor William Colburn was elected and remained mayor until 1981. Colburn was the longest-serving mayor to date. Mckinney was elected mayor in November of 1985 and served 1 term. Hans Conrad was elected in November of 1989 and served until 1993, when Lynn Jones was elected and served until his untimely death. Mayor Gene Colburn was selected by the City Council to continue Jones's term.
My name is Linda McKinney. I am the widow of Keene R. McKinney. Now, that was a very tumultuous time during the time that Keene was mayor, because Greenpeace decided to come down full force on Calvert City, and that was to Keene like it was wounding his heart. And he took up for, of course, our community and Calvert City and stood strong. And I really feel like that Keene's service has bettered this community. He started the parks. He annexed all the plants to get them inside the city limits, and he did very, very many unknown things that have benefited this entire community in this entire area. And he was proud of just the community spirit that was here, and the helpfulness of people and the willingness of people to work and to make this place a good place to raise children.
I ran for mayor and won that, and then I served, I believe, 6 terms. I thought I was a pretty good mayor. I don't know what other people thought, but we did quite a bit. But Calvert City was a very unusual place. Everybody was interested. They loved to be here, and if they didn't like a small town, they wouldn't be here, see.
No, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is to see so many people who have taken Calvert City and the development of the city, the ownership of that, and have volunteered and did what they could do to make it a success. Nothing that's been achieved has been achieved only as a product of one person.
It's really interesting that each of us think of the city in our own way in our growing up, and who we know and who we don't know, and how we think it should be, tempered with a vision of how it could be and how it should be. And I think we're working really well together and have grown a community even stronger in the small town roots, and I think people should want to come and be a part of.
Calvert City Golf and Country Club opened in May 1970 with its 18-hole golf course, Olympic-sized swimming pool, and clubhouse. It was built on a farm Mayor William Colburn acquired from Henry Smith and lies off 5th Avenue between Oak Park Boulevard and Lone Valley Road.
And then Doc Colburn built the golf course. He just went around to all his friends that had a little money and said, "Give me some money, we're going to build a golf course," whether they played golf or not. And he raised the money, bought the property, and built the golf course and got a lease on it for like 60 years.
More of the charm to Calvert would be, getting on your golf cart and riding up to the golf course. And that's where, my kids can take lessons while I enjoy just teeing off and enjoying some downtime.
Since the dedication of Old Park, Calvert City has expanded its park system. Memorial Park has a splash fountain and amphitheater. Doctors Park hosts many ball games. The Chris Bynum Skate Park, named for the late comedian, radio personality, and city councilman, as well as the tennis and pickleball courts, have all been great additions to the town center.
Pickleball is like tennis, badminton, and ping pong. We are both Marshall County USAPA ambassadors, which means we promote pickleball and for local areas. And we've contacted several people in Marshall County and neighboring counties, and they have picked up pickleball.
But it's grown from 2 to roughly 40 regular players and 60 on our communication list.
On December 11, 2017, Calvert City Council recognized David Chumbler, a regular player on the city's basketball courts since they were built. The mayor said the council was recognizing Chumbler, quote, for inspiring countless youths and adults through his dedication to sports, end quote. The city also installed a marker with Chumbler's image etched on it. The inscription reads, quote,
a tribute to David Chumbler, whose athleticism in sports and practice, patience, and perseverance.
In 1988, a group of local citizens, with the city's endorsement and assistance, organized a citywide festival they called Homecoming 88 over the 4th of July weekend. Lloyd Ford, who had long lobbied the city to establish a festival on Independence Day, had hoped the homecoming would evolve into a yearly event. In 1989, Lloyd Ford and several other business owners and citizens formed the Calvert Area Development Association and sponsored Freedom Fest on July 4, 1990. Now called Ameribration, no matter what day of the week, the festival is always held on the 4th of July.
We love Ameribration in my family. A lot of our family, in fact, a lot of our family from outside of Calvert comes here because of the great fireworks and the parade.
This is a staple event that you can expect Calvert to see every year, and it's a great festival for you to bring your family to. A wonderful day that's got activities for all age groups, whether it's live music, whether it's the kids parade, and we have other kids activities, but of course you end the night with a really huge fireworks celebration on the water.
Over the years, CADA has started multiple annual events. Kites Over Calvert, Fall Fun Fest, the Ameribration Pageant, the Calvert City Christmas Bazaar, and the tree lighting. These volunteers take time from their busy schedules to improve the quality of lives for our residents in our region.
92 maybe is when CADA actually started, because I think that's on the bylaws. But it has made a big difference in the town too. There was a core group of young people like you that were here raising their children. So and they were from all over. They weren't just from Marshall County. It was, not that that's bad, I don't mean that, but it brought in new ideas, and we all did things together that bonded our friendship.
The Benton Lions Club chartered the Calvert City Lions Club in 1948. Lions organized the volunteer fire department and helped raise funds for the first fire truck in Calvert City. In the late summer of 1950, a house being built in a new subdivision caught fire in the middle of the night and burned to the ground, even with the work of a bucket brigade. At the next Lions Club meeting, it was voted to purchase a fire truck.
There was a house that caught fire in Calvert and burned to the ground, and there was no fire department around. There was none. And the Lions Club got together and decided to put together a fire department.
So we decided we'd better get us a department ready and get us a fire truck and get started, so we did. And that's when we got our first fire truck.
Bought a fire truck, and we have that fire truck today. It's been restored.
We're just keeping it for our antique. And keeping it because for the good it has done.
Oh, that was it was so beautiful. I just wish that Ed and Kenneth and all the older guys could see that truck now. because that's how it was when they first got the truck. That's what it looked like. I can remember riding on the tailboard, putting my coat on, hanging onto the bar, and putting my coat on, and there'd be about 4 or 5 guys standing on the back of the truck going to a fire. I always thought that was the coolest thing, to ride the back of the fire truck, you know.
We've had some narrow escapes on there because the only place we had to ride was on the dovetail on the back. I got thrown off of it down there by the old Gifty Tea Room, and Fred Ross just happened to catch me and keep me from falling plumb off.
And they went to Ed at his store, jewelry store, and told him what they wanted to do, and they wanted him to be the fire chief. And like he told me, he said, I told him I didn't know anything about a fire department, you know, really. This is all new to him, too, so.
Had a little old building that we had to keep the fire truck in. And it was so narrow inside that you couldn't get out the door, open the door wide enough to get out.
I got on the fire department in a different, unique way. I was dating the fire chief's daughter, Sherry. And I had gone home with them one day after church to eat lunch. And Ed said, fire meet tomorrow night, I'd like to see you there. I just kind of blew him off. Because that was the furthest thing in my mind, was getting on the fire department. But I still wanted to date his daughter. So I didn't go. Well, another month rolled around, and I was eating lunch with him again, and he had a way of looking over his glasses at you, and he told me, he said, I missed you last month. I didn't see you at the station. I'd like to see you there. So I said, well, I'll think about it. Well, that afternoon we was riding around, and Sherry said, what are you doing tomorrow night? And I said, I don't know why. She said, I think you need to go to the fire meeting. I said, do what? She said, I think you need to go to the fire meeting if you want to continue dating me. I said, well, I'd like to continue dating you, and I reckon we'll have to see. So guess where I was at on the Monday night? I was at the fire station.
And the fire department was out one night practicing burning an old barn. And my brother and I, you know, curious as we were, we walked down there. And Chester, who's Mr. Lowell O'Daniels, was the assistant chief then. And he said, what are you boys up to? We said, oh, we're just being nosy. He said, well, here, grab a hold of this hose and spray it on that fire. So that's how we got hooked.
This is an old style helmet. As you can see, it's made out of leather. And this was given to Ed when he retired. Of course, when he died, I got a hold of it, and I have it now. But we'd be doing something, and I would stop and think, what would Ed say or do? You know, or at a fire, I would be doing something, and I'd say, now how would Ed do this? So you do that, but you know, I admired him a lot, I really did. But those guys in that picture that you have there, they would love to see old number one again rolling down the street.
The Lions Club selected Ed Rindleman to be the first fire chief. In 1996, Rindleman's son-in-law took over as Calvert's fire chief until his retirement in 2019. The Lions Club and Women's Club were active in the community. They assisted in the naming of city streets, establishing a grid for house numbers, purchasing and installing street signs, and jointly starting the first public library in Calvert City.
The Lions Club have done just wonders of the things of Marshall County, as well as Calvert City. The first fire truck, the first street lights, the first ball fields, first library. In fact, the library that's here now is named for Lynn Thomas, who was a member of the Lions Club.
I mean, the list goes on and on of the many things that we've done in the community. We run the Celebration 4th of July parade and the Christmas parade, and have been running the Christmas parade or putting on the Christmas parade since 1960.
During Christmas, the Lions Club hosts its annual Christmas parade and is the longest running Christmas parade in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
The story behind the Christmas parade, I assume it's true because my mother and dad were good friends at Bob and B. Arnold. But at the time, they had a daughter, Mary Ann, who was a drum major and majorette, and there was no place for her to march. There were no Christmas parades around. So they started the Calvert City Christmas Parade, allegedly, so she would have a place to twirl her baton.
The Calvert City JCs were organized on December 18, 1961, with 5 men attending the organizational meeting. By the January 28, 1962 meeting, the membership had grown to 26. The JCs conducted their charter banquet February 26, 1962, and 2 years later, in 1964, the JCs built the Civic Center on Lee Cox's land with volunteer labor. The JCettes, the wives of the JC members, were organized soon after the men's group.
I was the president of the local JC chapter, and I learned so much from the JCs. I don't think they're very viable now, but the whole idea of them was to provide young men with the opportunity to participate in an organization to learn communication, leadership skills. That really was what they were about. And sometimes it was almost like, let's go have a project so that we can have someone who can be chairman of that project and lead it. I mean, sometimes they almost seemed that way. The project in itself was almost secondary to sort of the process or the journey of it.
After the Civic Center was completed, the JCs and JCettes began hosting teen dances on Saturday nights.
Prior to joining the JCs, I was a youth that went to some of their dances that they had right after they started it.
Calvert City's future is already bright, but we don't want to settle. In 2021, we're celebrating the Sesquicentennial with 150 events and projects put in motion to make Calvert City a better place. From planting trees to highlighting our local businesses, 150 Calvert City's message sparks civic engagement and pride in our little city. From a railroad depot to a nationally recognized city for industry, Calvert City has come a long way since 1871, and we're celebrating all year. The events of 150 Calvert City include a 3-day festival of bluegrass music, art, videos, and history projects. We also plan to recreate some of the favorites held at Calvert City's centennial in 1971, like the world-class beard contest and an old-fashioned fiddler's contest.
I actually remember the first centennial when that occurred. I was about 10, I guess.
We wore our long dresses to work, and then there was the Centennial Ball. I remember we went to that, and seeing all the men run around with their beards, that was kind of comical.
All the men decided to grow beards and make it look more like it did 100 years ago from then.
You had the neatest beard and the longest beard, and I don't know, 3 or 4 different kinds.
All the men they had wild. Bill Burt's dad had the big lamb chops, and everybody had unique. Some people had the big long beards, and Fred Ross's dad had a big long white beard.
Oh yeah, my dad grew a beard, and that was funny to see. But he grew a beard, and he won the best beard contest. Somewhere I've got his plaque.
Gordon Hargrove was dressed like Abe Lincoln, and he won the top prize in the beard contest. Yeah, Fred Ross was connected with the paratroopers at Fort Campbell, and he got them to jump down there in the ballpark.
But that centennial was a big deal. I can remember that, even though I wasn't in town at the time.
The Sesquicentennial is an opportunity for residents to celebrate the pride and vision of our founder, Potilla W. Calvert, and to show admiration for those influential families that continue to keep Calvert City moving forward. When you care about your community as Calvert Cityans do, you must act in its best interests in all things, balancing the significance of the past and promising a brighter future. That is exactly what our current leadership continues to do.
Now, when I sit down at Food Truck Friday on Friday nights and see the people in the park, and I see the people playing soccer and playing in the fountain and the bands playing on the stage, it brings tears to my eyes because that's Calvert City. That's how we've grown.
Calvert City, you're never alone. If you feel lonely, you just walk out your door, you find a park, and that's where you'll find somebody to chat with.
I think the greatest feature that this community has is the people itself. The people of this community love this community.
But there's just something about the hospitality, the interaction of Calvert City.
It's just a good community where if you need something, it's available. All you have to do is go ask.
I always say that Calvert City is just it's sort of a hidden gem. Everybody goes down 62 or they pass through on the interstate and they think that's all there is to Calvert City until maybe they just drive a little farther over to Fifth Avenue and see the parks and see what all we have going on. But I'd also throw in there that our biggest resource is our people. And people love Calvert City. They love this town, and they're willing to work for it. They're willing to fight for the things that they believe the city needs and the things that they think are right.
When I think of Calvert, I think of home. And that's what Calvert means to me. It means home.
Priorities over the coming years include necessities like improving existing infrastructure, housing, and streets, but also focusing on cultivating a prosperous tourism culture. What makes our city special is not the history, culture, pristine parks, biking trails, or the Tennessee River and Kentucky Lake. It's the people. It's the community.
And I think the thing that I like best is that so many people have been involved, and so many people now have captured a vision to make Calvert City the very, very best place it can be. I'm proud of the Greenway Trail. I'm proud of Fifth Avenue, Highway 62, the airport, multitudes of other things. But it's the people that I'm most proud of.
The former mayor, Lynn Jones, said it best, quote, "The best of life is right here in Calvert City, and that life is limited only by our imagination. So let's imagine big. Another generation depends on us." End quote.